Welcome back. Katie Harper from Project Neutral here again for our last segment. In our previous video, we measured our carbon footprint and we wrote down the responses in our worksheet, broken down by the 5 categories: home energy, transportation, travel, food, and waste. Now that we have an estimate of our carbon footprint, what do we do with it? What's the point? Well, as a number by itself, it doesn't do very much at all. But as a prompt and as a first step, it's powerful. The aim is to use your carbon footprint as a guide, as a starting point on a journey to reducing your own emissions and helping to shape a healthier and more sustainable future for all of us. Just in the act of measuring our footprint, we start to be aware of the impacts of our daily choices and understand where the emissions are coming from. So, for example, you might look at your food footprint and decide that that's a good place to start. Maybe you're curious about trying out a plant-based meal. Maybe you want to go vegan. Maybe you want to just avoid wasting food. And so you do something simple like grab a sticky note and put it on the fridge to remind yourself what food is about to go off. There are lots of things, little and big, that you can do. The good news is that because we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions so urgently, every action we take today matters. But here's a question. How do you get your food impact to zero? Well, actually, you probably can't. The systems that we live in make it really hard to completely eliminate carbon pollution from our meals or other aspects of our lives. And that's why changing the system is arguably more important than our individual actions. But the good news is that as individuals, we have the power to make change. Collectively, our individual actions add up and can help shift the systems. Let's talk now about how to amplify your impact. Let's talk about 2 kinds of power. The first is social power. Whether or not we realize it, we are all influenced by other people around us, and we can use that to make a difference. A recent study found that people who knew someone who gave up flying because of climate change, they flew less as a result as well. When you take climate-friendly actions, other people pick up on them. You help normalize them. Your actions make ripples. So when you're thinking about making a change in your own life, think about how you can bring others along as well. For example, maybe you're interested in switching to a plant-based diet. Well, why not try it together with friends for a few weeks? Or maybe you're thinking about doing a zero waste challenge. That's awesome. Doing it as one person is great, but could you bring along people from your school or a club or a faith community or somewhere else in your larger community? This quote says, "We don't need a handful of people doing zero waste perfectly. We need millions of people doing it imperfectly." And that's true. That actually makes a bigger difference because many, many people doing something together adds up. Taking action matters, but sharing your actions, telling other people about how they make, why you're making those choices and inviting them to come along, that makes an even bigger difference. Let's talk about another type of power, political power. That's just the ability to influence how decisions are made. For you, maybe that means looking at the parts of your footprint that are higher than you'd like them to be, but maybe where you don't feel like you have a lot of options to make change. For example, we know some folks live in buildings that don't have green bin pickup. In that case, you might decide to get involved with efforts to set up a compost system in the back of the building, or maybe to advocate for green bin service in your community. Here are a couple of other examples from Canadian youth. High school students in British Columbia realized that climate change was mainly taught in elective courses that weren't offered in all schools. That didn't seem fair, and it didn't seem like it was going to adequately prepare young people in the province to face the challenges of the future. So this group of teens formed Climate Education Reform BC. It's a student-led organization that advocates for climate change education across British Columbia's K-12 curriculum. Many of us know about Greta Thunberg. She sparked a global movement with her school strikes for the climate. But back in 2018, before Greta was even a household name, 11-year-old Sophia Mather from Sudbury, Ontario, was the first student in Canada to join the Fridays for Future movement. Since then, Sophia's been continuing to strike every Friday and has joined with 6 other young advocates from Generation Climate Action. Together, they're taking on the Ontario government, taking it to court over climate change. These are just 2 examples, but I'm inspired by all the people, young and old, who are helping us shape a world that is healthier, more sustainable, and more equitable for humans and all of the species on Earth. I'm curious, what are you feeling inspired to do? For our last section, what I want you to do is grab your worksheet or a piece of paper, if that's been what you've been using, and write down 3 actions you can take that have a positive impact on the climate. Then I want you to think about how you can involve others in your action to create a positive ripple. I'll give you just a moment to reflect. All right, I hope you've got a few sparks of ideas that are starting to bubble up, and I'm excited to see where you go from here. When we started out in the first video, I asked you, how are you feeling about climate change? It's easy to feel overwhelmed. The climate crisis is serious, and we're already feeling the effects. But we know it's not too late to avoid the worst impacts. Every bit of warming we can prevent matters. And this next decade is critical. So another way to look at it is we are alive at just the right moment to change everything. Humans have never had this much power to shape the future before. This moment matters. Our actions matter. And some might say that's kind of a marvelous thing. So thank you so much for being here with me today. Let's continue the journey together at ProjectNeutral.org.